Hey guys, so we're going to talk about chapter 13, which is substance abuse misuse in your book. I have a list right here, so please don't think that I am looking down for any particular reason other than just to review my notes to make sure I hit everything. Thus far, I hope the class is going well and you're enjoying everything. If you have questions, please let me know. I'm continuing to be excited by the responses that you're giving, and I hope that you are too. So to get started, I want to discuss the very big difference between substance addiction and dependence. So we often use those words simultaneously or synonymously, and they are not synonymous. So please don't use them synonymously and don't think that they are the same thing, because they are not. So the difference between addiction and dependence is addiction means that you probably understand that what you're doing is wrong and you are facing consequences of it, but you're doing it anyways. So things like doing drugs while you're at work and getting caught and getting fired and then continuing to do those drugs anyways, or having a heart attack because you're doing drugs, going to the hospital, acknowledging that, and then doing them again while you're out. So those are very serious consequences that you're facing of an action, and continuing to do them because you have the need. It's not a want anymore, it's a need. Your body needs those drugs, or your brain needs those drugs, so you continue to do them regardless of the consequences or circumstances. So that's addiction. Addiction is 100% classified as a mental disorder or a disease. So it is no longer just addiction. It is characterized in your DSM-5 as a disease that has no cure. So sobriety is a lifelong quest of addicts, and they're constantly battling that every single day and have to have support and some sort of other reliance than drugs. So finding a different way to cope. Now, so talking about addiction, let's talk about dependency. So dependency is feeling like your health is dependent upon that substance. So you have a perceived notion that your health relies on whatever substance that you're using. So good examples would be a diabetic is dependent upon insulin to survive, or someone who has been diagnosed with high blood pressure is dependent upon their medication to regulate their blood pressure. Excuse me. Those things are dependency. They're not a craving or a consequence. They're just dependent to survive. So a lot of people are dependent upon coffee to wake up. That's a caffeine. Again, that's a dependency. So two very different things. Life's not altering with dependency necessarily. And dependency does not become addiction per se. It can in some circumstances, but please don't think that that's like the gateway to addiction is dependency. They are two different words and they mean two completely different things. So addiction can come in different forms, and we all are susceptible in different ways. So some risk factors that come with addiction would be genetics. 40 to 60% of our genetics make up that risk factor for addiction. So if you know that alcoholism runs in your family, you should be highly aware of that and be knowledgeable that alcoholism is there in your family history, and drinking might not be the best choice for you. Sometimes we don't fully acknowledge that genetic background is there, so we continue to take those risks, and sometimes it sets us up for failure. Not always, I don't want to say always, but we do need to be knowledgeable about those genetic components if addiction runs in your family, whether it's alcoholism, whether it's drug abuse, whether it's different things, nicotine. All of those things are categorized as addiction, and they kind of come from the same neuroreceptors in your brain. So whatever that component may be, just be aware of it. Just because alcohol runs in your family, so you don't drink but you smoke, that's the same situation. So alcoholism is addiction. You're putting something of substance that could be addictive into your body, by classification, putting you at risk for addiction to nicotine. So be aware of that. Another thing is exposure earlier and frequent in life. A lot of people who have alcoholics for parental units or that's around them, or I don't want to say drug addicts because it's a very bad phrase, but people who are addicted to substance or have substance misuse disorder are more prone to experience the same thing later on in life because they're exposed to it earlier and frequently within their lifetime. So that's something that they knew early on, and that's something that they were taught through visual aid. So that is a mock behavior that you can model if you don't know anything different or you're not taught differently. You're modeling those behaviors that you saw earlier in life more frequently in life. So again, the more early and often you see those behaviors, the more at risk you are for developing them. So please keep that in mind moving forward in this chapter, as well as life. Kids and young adults learn through modeling most of the time. So if they model a behavior, please be knowledgeable about that and be aware of that. So moving forward into discussing actual substances, there are 4 different categories of substances that we put each drug into. It doesn't matter, there's just 4 categories. Your first category is depressant, so that suppresses your central nervous system, causing you to be drowsy, sleepy, kind of sad maybe. The second is a stimulant, which does the exact opposite, so it kind of enhances your central nervous system, amping you up, making you feel excited, making you feel rejuvenated, energized, all those things. And then you have your third category, which is going to be your opioids. They're in their own separate category. They relieve pain, obviously, and they tend to block those pain receptors and kind of make everything numb. So you have a dull sensation, you probably get sleepy, and don't feel anything. Then your fourth one is hallucinogens, and those hallucinogen categories are just what they sound like, is hallucinations. You have activity in your brain that's causing you to see things or believe different things that aren't really there. So examples of those categories, a depressant would be alcohol. Most people don't think that alcohol is a depressant, but it is. Typically, if you drink a lot of alcohol, you pass out or you fall asleep. So that's an example of a depressant. Stimulants would be things like Adderall, cocaine, caffeine, and tobacco is also a stimulant. That's why people get addicted to tobacco, because it gives them that sense, that boost, that energy. It drives them. They start their morning off with nicotine and then typically end their evening with nicotine. Or that's why people who drink at parties also smoke at parties, because it gives them that extra boost and counteracts that depressant that they're drinking, essentially. So that's your stimulant category. Lots of other stimulants in there, but those are the 3 main ones that you might see in your book. Your third category is your opioids, which are pretty much self-explanatory. An opiate is an opiate, so things like morphine, oxycodone, oxycontin, and heroin is an opioid. So obviously heroin comes from the poppy plant, and that is an opioid essentially. So not essentially, it is an opioid. So those are your opioid categories. And then your last category is hallucinogens, which would be LSD, PCP, and things of that nature. If you're paying close attention to those 4 categories, you will notice that I did not use the word marijuana in any of those 4 categories.